Can you see?
Okay,
You can hear
cool.
me?
Yeah, everything's good. How you
Yeah,
feeling?
okay. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, man.
Good, man. Good to see you.
Same here, man. I saw the Phantasm interview. I was been a fan since. So I'm like, man, let me, you know,
Oh, I
it's cool for
appreciate
me to
that.
be
That's
here.
that's been a while ago. So yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So today's the opportunity to connect those dots and tell how you are a part of that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like I said, appreciate you joining me. I appreciate everybody for logging on. This is History Lesson episode 105. I am with Gage at the moment. Thank you for joining me.
Damn, what's up, man? I'm here. Thanks for having me, man.
No doubt. We're going to go way back and then work our way up to what you currently have going on. If you could take the viewers back and tell us all where you were born and raised.
Man, I was born and raised in New York City, Brooklyn, New York. My family is West Indian though. Everybody's from Trinidad. I'm from eight brothers and three sisters, and I'm the only one born in America, you know what I mean? But everyone else is born in Trinidad. So I have Trinidadian descent, all of my blood West Indian, but yet still I'm born in Brooklyn.
So, uh, in Brooklyn, can you take us back to life as a teenager growing up? What was life like for Gage growing up in Brooklyn as a teenager?
Man, it was crazy. It was a lot of fun, man. I mean, as far as when it came to the hip hop movement, I went to Walt Whitman Junior High School, and when I was going to that school, special ed was in that school. We know Phantasm went. We know a lot of different people from Busta Rhymes was in that school, and a lot of us, from Flatbush, Brooklyn, and people didn't really know that Busta initially was in Flatbush before he went to Long Island. You know what I mean? So, we was all from that neighborhood, Rampage. I mean, you name it, we all was in that neighborhood. And me and Special Ed used to battle all the time, man, like going back and forth. And he was the man of the streets. And it was like, yo, I had to come at him. So me and him used to always be in the schoolyard battling and going back and forth. So that's what was Flatbush like. We used to have the nice little parties in the basements, you know what I mean? And we used to always just go to the basement parties and party and just rap, man. And even in school, when we was in school, hitting the desk, and we, sometimes a whole gym teacher would just give us a whole period just to battle. You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute, we hear battles going on. Who's going after who? And then, the whole, it had Dave Ski. We had different people from different, areas just coming together and battling in the whole gym period. So battling was big back then.
Right. Can you take us back to some of your earlier influences, way before you were maybe even battling or way before you even thought about pursuing hip hop? Who was Gage listening to that influenced him earlier on?
Well, I'm gonna say, it's funny. I was talking to my boy the other day, and we was just talking about favorite artists and people who you love the most. And I would say Nas is like my favorite rapper of all time. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And I
Right.
think, and I like One Love is like my favorite record of all time. So
Right.
I was more listening to the Nas, and I mean, of course, I love Jay-Z, and you know what I mean, and a lot of them and Biggie. So I would figure those are the three that pretty much really had me vibing, you know what I mean? And of course, I was already rapping at that point, but I mean, those are the people that inspired me to keep pushing more and more.
Right. Being in Brooklyn, I mean, you're around hip hop. I mean, it's inevitable. What were you seeing firsthand in Brooklyn, hip hop wise, that made you want to start to be a part of the culture?
Well, what it was is, to be honest, man, like I used to see like guys would go to party. Like I told you, the parties that we used to have in the basements. I had brothers and friends that used to go around and just, in the middle of the party, they'll throw in an instrumental beat and dudes would just start spitting and rhyming and the whole crowd, everybody goes crazy and you get a nice punchline and everything. So from that moment, I was inspired. And to be honest, I was more like reciting other people's rhymes and stuff like that. And I was like, man, and then I just said, you know what, I could do this myself. And then I started writing my own. And then from that point on, you know what I mean? I'm going to school and, banging on the tables and all that kind of stuff. And while I'm doing that stuff, it just, just kept evolving from there. And I just started to get better and better and just keep going.
Can you take us back to what point or how did you get into hip hop? I mean, a lot of people would say they were breakers, graffiti artists, DJs. How did you eventually get into hip hop?
Well, again, like I said, with me, it was in the neighborhood, man. Like, I mean, it's not a coincidence that I can tell you legends as far as Busta Rhymes, Special Ed, Phantasm, UG from the Dwellers. All of us is in the same area. You know what I mean? So while we're sitting amongst each other, you know what I mean? You had no choice. Either you was dancing or you was rapping or you was playing ball. You know what I mean? So definitely the culture and the environment and Rampage and everybody battling. I mean, we had love for one another, but we was going at each other all the time, lyrically and making sure that we stayed on point, you know. So just the culture and the environment alone just made you know that, listen, this is something that I wanted to do. This is something I had to do.
Right. Can you take us back to some of your earlier creative process, putting the pad to the pen? Did you normally have to get a beat to make your rhymes, or did you just constantly always write earlier on?
Well, with me, my thing was I used to always get the beat first. And then once I got the beat first from a particular person, or back then we was always using instrumental beats from other people because we weren't getting the access to producers that often. But then at that point we had this dude named Backspin. Everyone speaks about Backspin. I'm pretty sure you heard about him. He
Right.
was pretty much the neighborhood producer. You know, and we used to always go in Backspin's closet because it was bad, close, and squeezed in. And we was banging them, you know, and being able to get beats from him. And that's when we finally was able to do our own stuff. You know what I mean? And that's when I was able to start writing my own records and doing that. And then I would go into shows like CBGBs and different things like that. Back then, we even had things like that where you could do a lot of showcases, and a lot of that stuff is not as, you know, as prominent as it was back then.
Right. You mentioned places like CBGBs and other spots. Can you take us back to what you had to do, what kind of dues you had to pay to get noticed earlier on?
Well, that's it, man. You had to, like, when you to get into a place like CBGB's, it was definitely a lot of underground artists that would be up in there, and then a lot of people who just love the underground hip hop in itself. You know, so I would go into CBGB's, and that's really where everything started to propel for me because this guy, Maestro Fresh Wes, happened to be there that night when I was performing, and I was a regular at CBGB. So I would have like 20 dudes on stage with me from Flatbush, Brooklyn, and we was just rocking, and you know, all of us is rocking the stage, and Maestro Fresh Wes happened to be in the crowd that day. And he came and he introduced himself to me, said, yo, I'm a big time rapper from Canada. And, you know, definitely, I think you're dope. And maybe me and you. He wound up living around the corner from us. He's
Mm.
living in Flatbush. Again, everybody was in Flatbush. So he wound up, he was living in Flatbush. And I'm telling him, yeah, whatever. Okay, cool. Well, we'll link up. And he said, yo, I want to take you on tour with me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And come to find out when I went to his apartment and I saw his Juno Awards and all this different thing, I'm like, this dude is for real. So then from that point on, he's the one who really believed in me and said, okay, listen, I'm going to take money from my own self and I'm going to put it into you, get you into the real studio, get my bro Self that came together and he produced the beat. And that's where Cranium was built.
You mentioned Phantasm and some of the guys earlier on. How do they fit into the scheme of things? Did they get with you before they started Cella Dwellers, or was Cella Dwellers kind of already in the mix earlier on? Ugg was your dancer,
Well,
is that
that's the
correct?
crazy. Yeah. What it was is that Ugg was a crazy dancer before he was a rapper. You know what I mean? Well, he's telling he was rapping as well, you know, but at that time we knew him for dancing, and he was like, I used to make money with Ugg. I would go into different, you know, places and be like, yo, my dancer would wipe out this whole place, and we'll put money on it. And I'll tell Ugg, I put the money up. You don't got to put in nothing. Just burn these dudes, and Ugg would just like flip off of ceilings and all kind of stuff, and like, and you know, and I was guaranteed money for me because he was just that nice. So Ugg was dancing for me, and Fanny lived around the corner from me again, and he's in Flatbush with all of us. And so Phantasm was to rock with me on stage. So me and him was, I don't like to use the word hype man because he actually had his own thing going as well. So he would do his own set. I would do my own set whenever we was performing together, and we would rock out together. So we've gotten shows like where we did that show with Gangstar and X Clan, and we was doing a lot of different shows together. And at that time, Phantasm was my hype, was hyping with me. Ugg was dancing for me with my boy Akim. So though that's how them two met. So they met within that group in that circle. And they speak about it whenever you hear them say, Ugg danced with this guy and Fanny was with them on the side. So I'm that dude. So
Right.
from there, it was a situation where they came together and they just started to click better as far as lyrically is concerned. I didn't even know Ugg was rapping like that until I heard Ugg rap, and I'm like, yo, you dope with that too. So him and Fanny got together and decided to do that, and it was history.
Can you give us a time frame when this was going on?
I would say 90s, man, like early 90s, it would say like, you know, within like 95, 96. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
mid 90s, we was around that time when we was doing that. So again, it was crazy. I just always seem to be that dude that, you know, like you get that good basketball player from a neighborhood who didn't make the NBA, but everyone know he was good. Like I got that kind of love. Like I was that dude that I was involved with a lot of people meeting one another and everything. But you know, as far as when it comes down to having that major deal, you know what I mean? It was the Cella Dwellers, it was Special Ed, it was Buster who kind of just, you know, got to that level.
Right. Do you remember the Cellar Dwellers pursuing their talent as far as getting a deal? Were you around during this time, getting signed to
Of
Loud
course,
Res?
of
What were
course.
you?
I mean,
Go ahead. What were you
man,
witnessing with those guys as far as getting their record deal with Loud Records?
well, again, I mean, they came together so nice, and then the fact that they had that unique style, where they came down with the when they was doing the different styles that they were doing that no one else was doing. You know what I mean? And they was doing a lot of that stuff, like the Land of the Lost and all that other stuff. So since they were doing that, you know, they were going and doing shows and killing it. Like again, back then, shows was common. Like we did a lot of shows where you know there was a lot of showcases and different things. And you know, we've seen that Loud was interested in them. And remember now, we've never lost contact. Like, I mean, Phantasm is still my bro. I speak to Ugg all the time. So even within that time with them getting that deal, we were still around. Everybody was around together and rocking together. And if there was times where they could have kind of got me on a show, they would. Or there was times when even the record, if you notice the Cranium record that I did, it's featuring them. The first press of it, they just did the chorus. Then we did an actual Cranium remix where they rapped on it. And that's
Right.
when they were still signed. So again, we still was a team.
Right. You mentioned Maestro Fresh Wes earlier on. You eventually got managed by him. What was the conversation like to make you want to sign and be managed by him?
His work ethic, man. Like Maestro Fresh Wes, man, he didn't just get his stardom handed to him. That dude is a worker, man. Like I was the dude that was hanging out, like, yo, let's drink, let's smoke, let's hang, let's check the girls. And Wes was more like, yo, we got a studio session. And there's times where he would make me go to a radio show at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, bro, nobody's up listening to this radio right now. And he's like, Gage, it's gonna be people up. I don't care if it's 5 people up. That's gonna be 5 more people who's gonna know you. You know what I mean? And he would walk around with my stickers, because back then we had stickers. Remember, we used to do the sticker stuff. So he would have my records, my demos. He would have my stickers. You know what I mean? Yet still, he's the biggest artist in Canada. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting there like, this dude's work ethic is just insane. So it's like that was a blessing to me to have him manage me more or less than anything else.
Right. At this time, what was your relationship with guys like Organized Confusion, who were blowing up early 90s? Prince Poe eventually
Wow.
did a song for you. Take me
Man, so you
back.
did your research.
Yeah, man.
Wow. Yeah. So I was doing another showcase. Again, like we said, we do so many showcases. And at one time while I was doing the showcase, Prince Poe was in the audience, so we're killing the show. And like, we've always been killing shows, So while we're in the show and we're doing our thing, and, Prince Poe is there. So after the show, he came over to me. He was like, bro, I think you're pretty dope. You know what I mean? And here goes my number. And I'll be honest with you, man, like out of all of the people that was pretty known in that way, in that time, Prince Poe was like one of the most humble dudes you could ever meet, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? The most humble dude.
I've interviewed him twice recently, and man, we keep in contact. He's always
The most humble.
Absolutely.
Like the thing about him, it's like if you real and you one of him, he's one of you. He's with you. You know what I mean? If it's about fakeness, then he's not with the fake. But if you with him and you got his back, he got yours. So he even came. Now this dude is like one of the biggest artists at that time, with him and Pharaoh, and they doing their thing. And then he came to a studio session with me one day and was like, yo, let me just put this beat together. And one thing, I always use this analogy when it comes down to Prince Poe. I had a studio that was probably, it wasn't, let's say $2,000 worth of equipment. And you could have a studio that has $200,000 worth of equipment. And Prince Poe came into my $2,000 studio and made that beat sound like it was a $200,000 studio. You know what I mean? Because he has that talent. And I'm telling you, you have other producers who use that same studio and it didn't sound as good. And I'm sitting there saying, it's this dude's talent. You know what I mean? That he's able to make this sound the way he mixed his beats and everything to sound that great. So I was just blessed by the fact that he would even come in the studio and do a track for me. And then that record was called Down to Earth. And we were talking about weed and everything back then. So it was pretty dope, man. I mean, it was great. And I still speak to him up to today. If he goes on live and I go on, he'd be like, Gage, what's good? You know what I mean? And that's how it is, So we still fam.